أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome everyone to our open forum of question and answers. I've received some questions. Actually, the questions this time around are not that many, but there are a couple that are interesting. So we'll see how far we go. Brother Mohsen had asked me perhaps if we had some extra time to speak a little bit about Imam al-Ghazali, about his biography, etc. Unfortunately, I'm traveling at the moment, so I'm in a hotel room and I don't really I'm not able to prepare for that tonight. So we'll answer the questions. If some of my answers are not clear, we can follow up. And then maybe with everyone's permission, we can delay speaking about Imam al-Ghazali the next session, inshallah. Okay. In no particular order. The first question is, I'm just reading from my phone, the question. We read and memorize the Quran without understanding the meaning, as we don't know the Arabic language. It means we can't talk to our prophet or angels too, in other words, in another world, and it seems hard for us to learn the language. What do you suggest we do? Well, I think it's important that we remember that reading the Quran, any association with the Quran has benefit. So whether you read the Quran, whether you listen to the Quran, whether you think about the verses of the Quran, whether you read the tafsir of the Quran, all of those things are going to have impact. All of those things are going to have benefit. They'll just have different types of benefit. So there should never be a moment where you find yourself not wanting to have a relationship with the Quran. So anything that you can do with the Quran is going to be of benefit. You have to, that's sort of a first principle that you have to believe in, and never give up on that process. As far as conversing with Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, you can converse with Allah and the Prophet ﷺ in your own native language. That is a relationship that is beyond a specific language. So whether it's in your dua or whether it's in your munajah, you're calling on Allah Ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, this can be in any language. And every Islamic language, Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, Turkish, Malay, all of the major Islamic languages, and even the minor Islamic languages, Swahili and others, they all have their own tradition of poetry, or what we call munajah. Munajah is to call upon Allah Ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ. So there's nothing wrong with that. Don't think that because you don't understand the Arabic or you're not an Arabic speaker, somehow you can't have a relationship. That's not true. As far as what can you do to improve your understanding of the Quran, is you can read the tafsir. There are many tafsir in many languages. I think we shared a document not too long ago that can help. Perhaps if people are very concerned about the issue of the Quran, maybe what we can do is right before Ramadan, maybe we can have a special session on this where I can put together some resources for everyone. Sorry, I'm not sick, but it's the middle of the night and I don't know, some dust came in my nose. Okay. So I remember now that there's another question related to the Quran. Let me just get that question. Is listening to the Quran as beneficial as reading? Yes. Listening, reading, looking at the page of the Mus'haf, etc. Like I said earlier, all of those things are a form, or all of those things are a type of relationship with the Quran. So now the most beneficial is to have the Mus'haf in front of you, and then you're reading from it. So that way your eyes are engaged, your ears are engaged, your tongue is engaged, your hands are engaged because you're holding it. But that's optimal. That doesn't mean that anything other than that is not good. No, it just means it's not full marks, as that is. But listening to the Quran is a very, very powerful tool. And as a matter of fact, there are many people in the Muslim world who have memorized the entire Quran simply by just growing up hearing it always recited. In the Muslim world, you'll find many Muslim majority countries will have a Quran station in which the Quran is literally playing all day long. It's very common in the Muslim world that people will have the Quran. They'll start their day by listening to the Quran, whether they're a shop owner or they're a taxi driver or a bus driver or whatever. Actually, it's very common if you go to like a restaurant or something like that early in the morning, as they open up the windows and they're cleaning it, that's the first thing they do is listening to the Quran. So listening to the Quran is very, very important. And because we don't live in a Muslim majority environment, we sometimes forget that that's something that's important because it's culturally so common in the Muslim majority world. So one of the things that we have now that we might have not had before is that we have technology that allows us to listen to the Quran. So everyone has a smartphone, yet anyone can download a free free Quran app, and you can have the Quran listen. You can start your day by listening to part of the Quran. On Fridays, you can listen to Surah Al-Kahf, so on and so forth. So all of that is very beneficial, and my goal is to get everyone to understand the importance of having a relationship with the Quran no matter what. Is there a chat? One second, I forgot to open the chat box. Okay. Can everyone hear me and see me fine?
Fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is about yoga. Yoga is a Hindu spiritual practice, exercise rather. I do it for the last few years. Is it permissible? So yoga is a form of worship that belongs to another religion. It's not an exercise. It is a form of worship. It's a form of ibadah. There are different types of yoga, but collectively, the goal of yoga is to arrive at a oneness with the Creator, what we call in Arabic al-hulul, which is completely haram. It's a completely haram concept because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah ta'ala, nothing is like Allah ta'ala. Allah cannot be likened to anything. Allah cannot be placed in anything, nor can we be placed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So its fundamental belief is something that is quintessentially opposite of tawheed, of our tawheed. And as a general rule, we are not allowed to participate in the acts of worship of another religion. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the things out there in the marketplace that are called yoga are actually yoga. A lot of times they're called yoga simply as a marketing tool. So if it is an actual Hindu practice, an actual Hindu form of yoga, then that would be haram. And I know people might not like that. That's why maybe there might be some back and forth tonight or on this. But if it's a form of just exercise and somebody has just sort of called it yoga, as a way of marketing, then those would be okay. I've said this before in the masjid. So if people have been with us for a while, I hope you realize that this is not something new. There are also other forms of Islamic mindfulness practices that, as a matter of fact, I'm in the process of developing. Not that I'm going to have the answers to everything, but I am in the process of developing some tools, and I hope to share with everyone very soon. And there'll be some announcements forthcoming at the masjid, inshallah, in that regard. So I don't want people to think that, oh, but I did this yoga and it helped my back or it helped my sleep. Or there are other exercises that you can do that will have the same effect, but will not be knocking on the door of another faith tradition's worship. One time, maybe, 15 years ago or something, the Mufti of Egypt at the time who I was working for, he was asked this question and he issued a formal fatwa saying that yoga was haram. And it was such a scandal that the Indian ambassador to Egypt came to the office to meet with him, and he was so outraged. How could you say that, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out that the reason the ambassador was upset is that he said, this is a big economic, instrument for us. We have a lot of money in the yoga industry. So he wasn't necessarily concerned with the religion aspect of it, but the economic aspect of it. Okay. We are challenged by our 17-year-old daughter. She has struggled with aspects of Islam and now has taken a boyfriend. She has also struggled with following the rules related to phone time and usage. We plan to meet with the boy and his parents to talk to them about our boundaries and values in this relationship, and also to let them know that we do not approve of this relationship, but we are only tolerating it so that our daughter does not sneak behind our backs. What advice do you have for us on how to handle the situation in terms of messaging and boundaries while avoiding the impressions that we approve of this kind of relationship in any way? So there are a few things that come to mind when I read that question. The first thing is the daughter has struggled with aspects of Islam. So that's something that piqued my interest. What does that mean? What are those problems that she's having with Islam? Would she be willing to sit down with either me or with Imam al-Rafai and talk about that? I have aspects that I find in Islam that I have difficulty understanding. As a matter of fact, I'm here on this trip and I was engaging with one of the muftis that I'm dealing with on my trip. And we had a very, very strong difference of opinion on an issue. What he said did not sit well with me at all. And because I'm a guest, I didn't want to make it a big deal. And I didn't want to, but ever since that, it was maybe a few days ago, or maybe it was last week, I've been thinking, that I can't stop thinking about that issue. And I keep, collecting my thoughts, and we all struggle with things. There's nothing wrong. That's one of the joys of life, I think, is to struggle with something, to be able to ascertain its beauty and to continue to question it. Every time I've questioned Islam, it's always borne fruits for me. And my Islam it seems to me to be very coherent and copacetic with each other. And I didn't get that way by just accepting what people told me. I got that way by critiquing and asking and reading and spending essentially my whole life on this path of trying to learn. So I want to encourage the family or this young girl or all of us that we need to ask questions. Now, when you ask questions, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the exact answer that you think you want. The question might jar you. The question might be incomplete. The question might cause you to have more questions. The question might cause you to have to do some more research, to make more effort to learn, so on and so forth. So this is the main part of the question for me. There's two main parts. That's one part, is that the girl has a problem with aspects of Islam. I'm reading in between the lines, therefore it caused her to move a little bit away from her practice of Islam in certain aspects. So we should welcome her with full arms and with love and with mercy, and we want to help answer any misconceptions that you have. وَمَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا الْبَيَانِ. The Quran says all our obligation is to demonstrate and to show. People may decide for themselves. So our job is to answer those questions and to make sure that people don't have any confusion. The other part of the question is that she's 17. I mean, khalas, she's an adult. So as parents, as hard as it is, to say, she's an adult, a young adult, let's say. I mean, I know that she's still at home and still that. I didn't mean that she's gone, but I meant she's at an age in her life where she needs to make her own decisions and she needs to bear the consequences of those decisions. And as somebody who's still connected to the household, you're supporting her. She still has a ways to go with her education, that she needs to understand that support comes with certain very basic and very broad conditions. I don't have to support my children in something that I do not agree with if they are old enough to make that decision. So if you're old enough to make your own decision and to be independent and to have your own lifestyle, then that's the whole package. It's not that you can just do that, but then I still have to support that, or I have to condone that. So at some point, that conversation has to happen. Overall, when it comes to our children, the older that they get, I think the more, all the time with our children, I think we need to be loving and understanding and forgiving. And we need to acknowledge that it's very, very difficult. The world that we live in is increasingly difficult, especially for people of faith, especially as people, as a minority community. The the desire to seek a companion, to find somebody from the opposite sex to be with, companionship, intimacy. It's a normal, Allah Ta'ala created those feelings within us. And Allah Ta'ala has also guided us on a halal way of doing that, and there's a haram way of doing that. And we just want to sort of very gently help push our children or influence our children towards the right way. So I think meeting the boy and his parents, so on and so forth, is a good idea. Setting boundaries, I think, is a good idea. And I think you have to just be gentle and sort of nudge in a gentle way. I have a teenage daughter and she is on TikTok most of the time. She does not pray. She does pray and is religious, but I fear she will go astray as she is communicating with diverse friends and also engages in fashion and music. I keep watch on her and track her cell phone. She does not like my spying. I do not want her to get disenchanted with me, as she will in a few years be going to college. So I do not condone spying on our children. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا, and do not spy upon one another. So if your children are young adults, they also have the right to have their independence. They have to make their own decisions and they have to bear the consequences of those decisions. So don't spy on your children, unless you think your child is about to harm themselves or something so, so dramatic that you must interfere. But in almost all circumstances, I would say we should not be spying on our children. We need to have their trust. At the same time, fashion and music, there's nothing haram in and of itself in fashion and music. I mean, who amongst us does not want to dress well or to dress appropriately, or and music is just a part of life, and it's a natural part of life. And we've talked about that before. There's good music, there's bad music, there's halal music, there's haram music. Music is a natural phenomenon that Allah Ta'ala created these rhythms and these sounds in the world around us. It's just a natural thing. There's nothing haram. It's not a naturally haram thing. So getting involved in or listening to music or whatnot is normal. This, the use of social media is a problem that it's not just for children or young adults, but all of us have this problem because it's a huge waste of time, and it can be, there's an addictive quality to it. So rather than hammer away at it's such a waste of time and the negative, I think it's also important that we balance it from the other side, that we balance our time with also other things. So rather than say, I'm so upset that you're on TikTok all the time, this and that, filling our time or part of our time with something else that's constructive, to build positive habits. Reading is very, very important. And I think it's Mark Twain who said something along the lines that there is no difference between the illiterate person and the literate person who doesn't read. So if you're able to read, but you actually don't read, you're basically an illiterate, uneducated person. So Allah Ta'ala has created us with this faculty of language, and it is our greatest tool. And as a matter of fact, the faculty of language or the technology of language is one of the secrets behind the message of Islam itself, because the message of Islam is in the Quran, whose language is miraculous, and in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, are both preserved in the original language. And it's one of the things that Islam brought, to reinvigorate this importance of language. So spending time reading or just doing constructive things, going out as a family, being part of nature. So I find that the better approach is that we have to have balance. It's not, I'm going to limit your phone usage using a phone tracker or something like that, and that's the only solution. It's only going to develop resentment. And then when your children leave the house, whenever they leave, they're just going to resent you even more. Okay. I have another set of questions. Let me go to that. Can a wife give a divorce to her husband? The wife initiating a divorce is called al-khula'. A talaq, divorce, is a man divorcing his wife. And khula is when the wife asks for the divorce and then she returns the mahar to the man. And then a fasakh, an annulment, is when the court annuls the marriage. And they all have different conditions and rules and regulations. But there is a way that a woman can, and I don't know why people don't realize that this idea that women have no rights in the marriage and so forth. It's one of those misconceptions. How do you do ruqya? Well, ruqya is simply reciting different prayers or verses of the Quran for those who are sick, or doing them for your children, when they're young, to protect them, like before they leave the house. There are many, many hadith that talk about that. There are many verses of the Quran that are used. So if you look at a book like Imam al-Nawawi's book, Kitab al-Adhkar, the book of remembrances, which we have in the masjid, you will find a chapter on ruqya for the sick or ruqya for your children, so on and so forth. Okay, the last question that was sent to me was this. Must one say sallallahu alayhi wasallam after speaking about the Prophet? Also, must one say it after simply thinking about him? I find myself having to constantly say it as I think about him quite often, and it's becoming a little too much, and I feel like I'm committing a sin if I don't. The issue is not the issue of halal and haram. The issue is the issue of love, that we love and respect the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever hears my name and does not send salat on me, then they are stingy or bakhil, which is a bad thing. We don't want to be in that. So those hadith about saying sallallahu alayhi wasallam after the mentioning of the Prophet's name, meaning that it's mustahab, meaning that it's encouraged, but it's not wajib. It's not an obligation that every single time you hear the Prophet's name, you have to say sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But if you don't say salat on the Prophet, then you are leaving, how we say in business, you're leaving money on the table, right? You're leaving a huge advantage, a huge qurbah, a huge act of worship, a huge, who amongst us, we say that we love the Prophet, how we would cringe to even hear his name and not say sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But maybe sometimes you're talking about him, like I'm giving an answer and I'm mentioning his name so often that I might drop once or twice, but I didn't mean to. It's just sort of for the flow of the talk or the flow of speech. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as one has not left it out of malice, that's fine. So it's something that is mustahab, something that is encouraged. The salawat on the Prophet ﷺ is one of the greatest acts of worship. It's something that can be done without limit. It's something that solves essentially all of one's, dunya and deen problems. So it's something that we definitely want to be involved with. Okay, there are some questions in the chat. How do we differentiate the different types of yoga? You can look them up. There are different types of yoga that are, as I said, Hindu yoga. And there are the things that are just completely made up, that are just called yoga because they're just made up. I am not an expert in that. I would have to, if somebody sent me the name of something, I could look it up and I could tell you that this is, an actual Hindu practice or versus this is just a commercial practice. My name, okay, this is a private message. I like to draw, so my question is, can I draw eyes? Yes, you can draw eyes. You can draw, the only thing that is haram for us to do from the image point of view is to create a three-dimensional image, a complete three-dimensional image. The drawing is fine. All languages are created by Allah. I believe that therefore in the other world communication with angels and other friends of Allah will not be constrained by any language. Yes, actually, this is a huge debate amongst the scholars. What is the origin of language? Is language, all languages, do they come from Allah? Is it one language that came from Allah and the differentiation came from man? Is it that there were some proto-languages that came from Allah and then the derivatives came? But the majority opinion is that Allah Ta'ala is the one who established the boundaries of the language. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Allah Ta'ala taught all the names of all the things to Adam alayhi salam. And the proof of that, the majority opinion has, is that if you look at language, if you look at different languages, you find many, many similarities in the way that we refer to certain words or certain expressions or certain sentence structures, so on and so forth, even the alphabet and things like that. But yes, Allah Ta'ala, there's no language barrier between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah Ta'ala knows your intention, if Allah knows what's in your heart, how can Allah not understand you? So there's no language barrier with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A teacher I knew shared with her students to spend time one-on-one with your child, no matter how old, walk, read, draw, window shop, and read one line or two lines of the Quran as two worshippers daily helps. Ameen. Whatever combination works. The more time you spend with your children when they're young, the better, because it's going to give you mileage in the future. But life can't just be we're watching Netflix and we're on our phone. We were not created to do that at all. And it's just we're wasting our life. We're wasting our life away. There's a portion of the day that needs relaxation and unwinding. But if that becomes the majority of what we do, it's very, very scary. And the fact that most people don't read anymore, or a lot of people don't read, is also very scary too, because language and reading opens up so many different worlds to us that are of benefit. Recently in Pakistan, we had a tragic incident of an innocent Sri Lankan man who was brutally murdered by a mob in the name of blasphemy. This has led to many people to call for revoking the blasphemy law, since those mobs attacked against a non-Muslim have become very common. I know classic fiqh speaks of punishment towards blasphemy, but I'm curious, how does the Sharia define blasphemy, and what is the court procedure to determine the accused is guilty of such a crime? Well, the thing about blasphemy or cursing like Allah or the Prophet ﷺ or the religion or the Quran or something like that, these are all issues in the Sharia that belong to courts. They don't belong to individuals. So it is the purview of the court and the judge to investigate, and there are mitigative procedures that can take place at the court for the judge to basically find a loophole. Maybe the person didn't intend, maybe the person didn't understand, maybe the person was crazy, etc. So it's not just that, I heard somebody say something about the Prophet, so therefore I go and kill him. That's haram. You can't do that, because you can't take another life illa bil haqq, except if it's rightfully taken. What does that mean? Illa bil haqq means that they have been found guilty of a capital punishment beyond any doubt, and therefore the punishment is carried out. Other than that, you can't just go around killing people in any legal system, or our legal system is the same. We do have blasphemy laws because these are sacred symbols. Every single nation, every single legal system has sacred symbols. They might not be the same as our sacred symbols, but there are sacred symbols. There are the symbols of the Constitution in our culture, of the flag of the United States of America. I mean, it's considered blasphemous in the secular political sense to burn the American flag, even though it might be something that's protected by free speech. We would cringe to even think of doing an act like that. We feel like it's like the language that we would use would be like, that's haram. Why would I do that? So it's a natural thing that there are sacred symbols, and the desecration of sacred symbols in almost all legal systems, oftentimes associated with, is capital punishment. I remember one thing that comes to mind is that when the Union troops recaptured New Orleans, General Benjamin Butler, who was the Union general, he actually hung several people for desecrating the American flag, because they were, they wanted to fly the Confederate flag, but it was recaptured, so on and so forth. So these things exist. It's not like it doesn't exist. But I mean, that's an extreme example because he was an extreme general. But my point is that it's not like something that doesn't exist except in Islam. No, it exists across the board. But it's something that belongs to the courts. And if it belongs to the courts, and if it's something that continues to happen, like I'm a judge and then every week I get 50 blasphemy cases, something's wrong. It's not, blasphemy is not something that happens with that kind of frequency. So therefore, the issue is is it really blasphemy to start out with? I've had people at the mosque come to me with blasphemy issues and say, oh, my distant cousin, or I have a relative back in this country or that country, and they're in hiding because they blasphemed against the Prophet. So what did they say about the Prophet? So they told me. I was like, well, that's not blasphemy. That's just incorrect information. So also I have found that Muslims have, oftentimes they don't know what blasphemy means or is, and they think that anything that they might misconstrue as a negative statement towards the Prophet is a blasphemy. And we have to have some tolerance. People have misconceptions about Islam. We have an obligation to teach them, so on and so forth. Can you more deeply explain the meaning of salawat on the Prophet? Salawat on the Prophet, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, is to ask for Allah Ta'ala's prayers and blessings upon the Prophet. And this is an act that Allah Ta'ala himself engages us. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. And indeed, Allah Ta'ala and his prophets send prayers on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah sending prayers to the Prophet doesn't mean that he prays him. The angels sending prayers on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a form of dua. Our salawat, or our asking of Allah Ta'ala to send prayers on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, also a form of dua. Because the Prophet is there's nothing in the created world that is greater than Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the enormity of the Prophet ﷺ and the sanctity of the Prophet ﷺ is without bounds. It is something that you cannot exhaust how much you talk about it, or how much you praise it, or how much you emphasize it, because it is the quintessential reality that this religion has come, in addition to tawheed, has come to teach humanity. So because of the enormity of that, because of the greatness of the Prophet ﷺ, when you engage in that act, an act that Allah Ta'ala himself engages in, it brings with it all of this reward. That when you pray, when you do salawat on the Prophet ﷺ, Allah Ta'ala prays for you 10 times. When you do salawat on the Prophet ﷺ, Allah Ta'ala forbids your skin from being touched by the hellfire. When you do salawat on the Prophet ﷺ, Allah Ta'ala solves, or it's enough for you. In other words, you don't have to engage in any other extra spiritual works other than your basic 5 prayers a day, and Ramadan and Zakah and Hajj. So there are all of these hadith extended to talk about the greatness of the act of the salawat of the Prophet ﷺ. But spiritually, what's happening is that you are attaching yourself to greatness. You are attaching yourself to beauty. You are attaching yourself to perfection. The Prophet ﷺ is an insanul kamil. He is the perfect human being. He is the perfect embodiment of what a human being can achieve. Of course, he achieved that through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through the purification process of prophethood, etc. I mean, we can't necessarily get to that level, but he is an example of perfection. So the Prophet ﷺ is not a hero. Heroes are from amongst us that overcome their doubt and overcome their demons, and they're heroic. The Prophet ﷺ is an archetype. He is a form of beauty and perfection. He is the definition of beauty and perfection. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So to do salawat on the Prophet ﷺ is to attach yourself to that, and is to bring those meanings closer to you. Can we send salawat on the Prophet ﷺ and his family companions while I'm laying in bed to go to sleep? It relaxes me, but I'm being told that no, you can do it no matter what. There's no mode in your life in which you can't. There's no way. There's nothing that you can say in that question. There's no way you can do it that would make me say you can't do it that way. It's something that's open-ended. As a matter of fact, the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ is accepted even from the non-Muslim in some of the traditions that we have. If a non-Muslim were to say, God said prayers on Muhammad, it would count for them and they would be rewarded for it. That's how great the act is. No, so there's nothing that should stop you ever from reading Quran, and there should never be anything you do that stops you from making dhikr or salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. Because those are, other than reading Quran, dhikr, of which salawat is a part, there are no preconditions to it. There are no limits to it. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا. Oh, you who believe, remember Allah often, night and day. So there are no preconditions or prerequisites to that. Oh man, did I lose the chat box? Okay, there it is. Given that Allah has sent prior prophets with prior traditions that all preach the single message of tawheed, how do you reconcile that in one tradition, Saturday is considered holy, alcohol is permissible, another Sunday is holy and eating pork is permissible? When Islam, Friday is holy and eating pork and drinking alcohol are both haram? Does one just chalk it off to man-made changes to prior tradition? The Sharia was different. So the message of tawheed, there are two things that all of the messages before us have. One of them is tawheed, and the other one is that every single prophet mentioned to their people that at the end of time there will be a prophet that will seal this lineage of prophecy, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But other than that, the Sharia itself changes. The Sharia changes throughout time, and that is Allah Ta'ala's purview. So this is not necessarily, there are man-made stuff that comes later, of course, that's part of it, but the Sharia just was different. So there are dietary things that change with the Sharia, there are ibadat that change, or the frequency of ibadat that change with the Sharia. So that's something different. The tawheed or the theology of the religion is the same, or the core of it is the same, but the way that you practice that theology, that has changed with the different revelations. Are there any other questions? So just while people want to think of asking questions, I wanted to mention something, which is that inshallah, I should be coming back home exactly a month from now, the week of January the 10th. So if it's okay with everybody, I would like us to do the next Ask Tarek session when I'm back, so we can do it at the masjid, if that's okay with everyone. I still haven't purchased my ticket yet. I'm like, as I said, I'm traveling right now. I'm going back to Cairo Thursday. So next weekend, I'll buy my ticket, inshallah, and I'll let Brother Mohsin and Imam Rafai and everyone, Sister Zamruda, know my dates. And once we have those dates, if it's okay, if we can, I know that we usually do this the first Tuesday of every month. The first Tuesday of January is January 4th, which will be, I don't know, maybe people are still on holiday. And because I'll be around the next week, if it's okay if we do that. That's one thing I wanted to mention. And there'll be other things that we'll do in the masjid, like Friday prayers and the class and all of that. So I just wanted to mention that, inshallah. And well, we can figure out the Christmas holiday time off on the Sunday class. I guess we can do that next week. Or I'll talk to Brother Mohsin or Imam Rafai about that. We could figure that out later. Any other questions? Class will still be on Zoom. Yeah, when I'm at the masjid, we do things on Zoom. My class, the Sunday class, if I'm at the mosque, I'll have my iPad. We'll do it on Zoom. If the Ask Tarek session will be on Zoom. If I'm not mistaken, the Jumada is still on Zoom. Yeah. So we still have that. Don't worry. Or maybe we should not do it on Zoom and just make everyone come to the mosque and charge everyone $50 for entrance. No, I'm just kidding. We're always going to do what we can to make sure that our content and our services are for everyone. You know that. And I'm sure there are people on this call right now that are from all over the world. I mean, I'm in Jordan, and I'm in Jordan. Brother Mohsen is in Sri Lanka. I mean, there's probably somewhere else. We have families that join us every week from Singapore. So alhamdulillah, I don't think we're going to stop that at all, inshallah. Hindu yoga invokes Om, 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 which is a Hindu prayer. What if we say dhikr? Like instead of saying Om, Om, that's the problem. So the problem is that we're gonna create like this syncretic act that could lead to spiritual confusion. My suggestion is that we engage. There are other exercises. The problem is I'm not very well versed in these things. So I hate to say, oh, don't do this, and then I don't have an alternative. So this is one of those cases where, unfortunately, that's what I'm saying. But there are alternatives. There are other practices and exercises, and like Tai Chi, and there are other Oriental things. The eight something circle or China. There are other exercises that you can do that are simply just exercises. They're not tied to some kind of dhikr, or they're not tied to some kind of religious practice. And those are the ones that I encourage. And those are the ones that I know that many Muslims who are into that engage in, and those are fine. But yoga specifically, because of it is a look at the Wikipedia entry of yoga. You will see what it is an act of worship, it's a form of ibadah. So you could tweak things from it if you didn't call it yoga, and you didn't do the Om thing, of course. There are ways to tweak it, of course. And as a matter of fact, that's what our ancestors did. Our ancestors inherited all of this stuff from it's not like our ancestors didn't know about yoga, or didn't know about ancient Egyptian religion and language, or didn't know about Buddhism, or they knew these things. They inherited these things from the ancient world, or Greek and Roman philosophy or literature. They knew these things, and the Sufis of Islam, they took these things in addition to what the Quran and Sunnah teaches us, and they developed their own practices. So we have our own practices. The point is to revive them and to reinvigorate them, so that we have something that's more native to us. So there are ways of I don't want it to seem like it's black or white. It's not black or white, but we are not allowed to engage in another form of worship, another form of ibadah, is what I'm saying. But there are ways to tweak it for sure. Yoga is meditation too. It's a type of meditation, yeah. But it's a meditation that leads to a belief that is not consistent with tawheed, which is union between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is not possible. According to yoga instructions, they teach to pick a word that allows one to breathe easily and not move focus from their mind and heart. Further, they profess to be mindful about what one chooses. In other words, the actual word is irrelevant to the yoga itself. Not to real yoga. That's the commercial yoga. But into real yoga, it matters. It matters what you say. It matters what chakra you're focusing on unlocking, all the way. No, that stuff right there, that's American yoga. That's McDonald's yoga. And that's why I'm saying there are things out there that are not yoga. They're just called yoga because they are considered to sell or as a commercial product. But yoga, textbook definition of yoga, no, that's not true. It does matter what you say, because it is an ibadah. It's an act of, it's like me saying you can do this prayer, but you can, instead of saying the Fatiha and whatnot, you can, just hum your favorite Bon Jovi song. And I just call it prayer. And then it's going to make you happy, and I just make it up, it's the American way. So there are things out there like that, like the sweat yoga or whatever it's called, Bikram yoga, that guy that was arrested. So there are stuff like that. In regards to our private message. In regards to the question about the young girl, the boyfriend, etc. I mean, this is a private message, so I won't necessarily read it, but my suggestion is that why don't we make an appointment that she can come by the masjid when I'm there in January, and we can just have we can just have coffee and tea. Just a friendly conversation. When you want to engage with our children and they're older, we don't also want to put pressure on them. We don't want them to make them feel like, oh, we're so disappointed in you. You need to go to speak with the imam, or you need to go speak to a counselor or a psychologist or something like that. I mean, imagine you being on the receiving end of that. You're not going to be so happy. Every time you think about your parents and culture and religion, it's going to be like this big black box. So just a friendly conversation. Why don't we just start, or a Zoom call, or just a friendly conversation, just sort of, would you like to ask anything, or how's it going, or how's school going, and what are you planning next, so on and so forth. Just non-judgmental, non-pressure, just to get the engagement going. Is it okay to use a 3D printer? In general, yeah, but if you're going to make a gun and go kill people at your school, that's haram. So the idea of using a 3D printer is fine, but it depends what you use it for. Or if you're going to make steel, like some companies, packaging and sell it as your own. I mean, there can be haram uses and halal uses, but the concept of using a 3D printer, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So I'll see everybody soon. Inshallah, our class will resume on Sunday. Sorry, I had to cancel class this last Sunday. I had a meeting at that time. I just was not able to accommodate the class time. But moving forward, things should just be smooth, inshallah. Do I want to say anything else? Rafai, did you want to? I see you popped up on the screen. Did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to. Earlier, you had mentioned about Sunday over the Christmas break. So just to let everyone know that for that one Sunday, I think we're going to be off.
Which is like the 24th, the 26th. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. I might have something in early January. I would travel. I can't remember right now, or maybe not. Anyway, I'll let you know way ahead of time. Okay. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.